Well, good morning, everybody. I was thinking about it. I think Tuesday is my favorite day to make forecast videos. There's the chaos of Monday trying to get a lot of content out. And then by Tuesday, you can really settle into a pattern and see where things are going. And I hope I've done that for you today. So here's the plan. After we talk about the potential tropical system that is coming out of the Bay of Campeche here heading toward Mexico, we're going to walk through, I think, some bigger picture things that I just want to make you aware of that I'm watching. So if we think about where the risk this summer could lie with the development of excessive heat and drought kind of on a more permanent basis, we want to make a case for what that would look like. I'll then walk you through the models. We'll then end up with a forecast on the temperatures. And at the very end, we're going to look at some new long-range data that was released yesterday from Columbia University and their IRI multi-model probability forecast system. My last three slides here about some international weather. So that's where we're going in this forecast. So here is some visible satellite data just before the sun set last night right there. And this will be the system they're going to keep a close eye on here in the near term. And I wanted to show you some visible satellite data just to remind you that for months leading up to this, there's been extensive drought throughout Mexico. There has been deep convection in the mountains, but the drought across this area it's been some of the driest on record, especially through the month of May. So this tropical system, which is heading right into this direction, will likely be a major reversal over the precipitation patterns we've seen. The other reason why I wanted to show you the visible data is just to kind of get an idea of this fire here in northern Mexico, because we're going to be looking at more of these as we get into the southern and southwestern part of the United States. But infrared really gives us kind of the full loop on what we're watching here. And as we talked about yesterday, there's very deep convection in this system. And given how warm the ocean temperatures are and the lack of wind shear, we do expect this system to strengthen and become our first named tropical system of the year. Currently, the National Hurricane Center, this is their early morning updates. So they will probably, let's see if they got another one in already. There it is. That's a 7 a.m. update. It's still called Potential Tropical Cyclone 1. And probably by later today it will have a name, but you can see the trajectory on where this is going to go. Some of the forecast ensemble members continue to keep what's left of this moving out into the open Pacific Ocean, and we just need to be monitoring that carefully to see if it actually influences the pattern in the East Pacific and maybe into kind of the southwest United States. I'll show you what I mean about that in just a few seconds here. But just a reminder where we are. This is the names we have this year. So remember, the name list repeats itself every 7 years unless the name is retired. And the first name on the list is Alberto. So just in case you need this, you can just Google National Hurricane Center hurricane names and you'll land on this page. But I do like the fact that they provide a pronunciation guide. So just to be clear, this tells you when to emphasize and how to say phonetically the names. It's Alberto when it gets named. So take a look at all the names for the remainder of this year. And just as a reminder, this is a year where the potential exists for us to exhaust the names and have to return back to the Greek alphabet again. So this could be a very active year as we go forward. Now, stepping things up a bit, let's come here to the U.S. And just before we get a brand new image this morning, I want to show you yesterday. The plume of moisture that was ahead of potential tropical cyclone 1 was pretty extensive. And we saw a lot of that moisture getting up here. And I want to make a case to note that we were able to get convection to pop inside of the developing ridge that's with this heat. And that's something we talked about. There will be storms inside of that heat that will be accompanying this ridge that's going to be with us for several more days here. But just as we get a brand new image here comes the newest one this morning. There it is. There's the sunrise this morning. We're just a couple of days away from the solstice now. And I want to take note of this. That right there is the smoke from yesterday's large wildfire in Mexico. And if I take you back, you can see it. There's the smoke plume from that fire in New Mexico yesterday. But there were others in California as well. And if we just kind of take a look, there's that smoke a little clearer this morning here. But if I take you back to yesterday, we can see just the sheer size of the smoke plume. And here it is. And what I think you might find interesting about this is when you take a look at the kind of the convective characteristics of smoke, it looks very similar to the convective characteristics of storms. In fact, we call sometimes the clouds that will form on top of these pyrocumulus clouds. So they tend to exhibit the same kind of behavior. This is a heat source that's rising in both cases. All right, so the heat is what's driving the rising motion in this storm, and it's also what's driving the rising motion in this smoke from this wildfire. We can also take note. So let me take you back here. It's kind of hard to see under the cloud shield here, But late in the day, you can see the wildfires that were in California as well. So we had red flag warnings out. Just wanted to point that out. And also, as the sun sets, got a brand new image there too. As the sun sets, you can see the heat signatures in the infrared. So one here, there, and there. Okay, where is all that smoke going? Well, over the next 48 hours, this is the forecast from the high resolution rapid refresh. It's about to reset here at the beginning. There it is. And we'll kind of get an idea on at least where the models are taking that smoke as we go forward from these kind of early season wildfires in the southwestern United States. So just some perspective on what we've got. Okay, I want to switch gears. Now that we've kind of got an idea of what just happened recently, I want to take you to where this is going to go. Now, we know the temperature extremes here, mid to upper 90s on repeat for several days going on in the eastern Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, getting up to the northeast. But as I play the pattern out, this is a 5-day sliding window of average temperatures. This gets us out to day 5 through 10, and then day 10 through 15. We are expecting the temperatures to climb and stay there for a broad section of the United States. But what I'm most interested in this pattern is, where does the jet stream live? Do we rob momentum from that jet stream? And if so, when does that occur and where does that set up ridges? Because the reality is, notice how we're bringing in some cooler air here. In the northern parts of the Canadian Prairie, there's cooler air, which means the contrast will drive a wind. And we've made a case that the jet stream is retreating farther and farther to the north. But as long as it doesn't shut off and just completely lose momentum and flow, then we will likely keep most of our main ag areas east of the Rocky Mountains with better and better chances of getting storms. Some of our worst drought years are when all of that shuts down. I don't necessarily see that happening. I want to build a case for you with that, because if you look out over the next couple of weeks here, we just continue to see over the next 14 days that the tropics are sending moisture, and we have this kind of active area here. Now, we are drier in a larger area, and that is a concern. And I do believe we will get storms popping in this, but that large, drier area is an area that's been drier for a while. We looked at this yesterday, but this is the newest data that I've got for you. And again, that region right in through here, kind of just put some bounding lines on it, that's been drier. We know that much more of this, and we start to see some stress on our crops that are grown in this area. So despite some of the spring rains that revive soil moisture, remember the hydrologic cycle has some speed to it. And as a result, a couple of weeks of drier conditions and you start to hit this area with mid to upper 90s. This could be a worse scenario if it was in mid-July, but as it stands, this is going to be putting some stress on crops all the way from the southeast up the East Coast and back to the Eastern Corn Belt. Now, I'm not really mentioning other places back farther to the west because we have cooler air in place here and a lot of rain. We're going to talk about what's coming to the southern plains here in just a few minutes as well. So I want to show you the jet stream. Now, my case has been that it's not lost its momentum, but it's shifted north. And as we play this forward, this is jet stream level winds. As I play this forward, I want to show you also the sheer size of the ridge that's moving into the East Coast now through Saturday. What's important about it is, watch this right here. This ridge is so large in this area that on its southern side, we're actually sending a wind out of the east in the upper levels of the atmosphere that goes across the southeast into the Gulf of Mexico, into Texas, and eventually pushes itself all the way here over toward the Baja. And what's interesting about that is, ahead of it, there's a tropical system that's going to be pushed over in that direction as well. But regardless, I'm out to Sunday, and we still see flow. And what I'm looking for is if that flow gets blocked, if we end up getting highs over lows, Rex blocks, if we end up getting just big blocking highs and a loss of momentum. And as I play this out here, this is the 23rd, 24th, 25th. The jet stream is more north, but it's not showing signs of a complete just demise in terms of its momentum and push. So we have to then look at the result of what that could mean and where we do have the risks of being drier and wetter. But first, I just want to give you this. When I go back to mid-May and look to mid-June, this 30-month time period, I'm looking at zonal winds. So this is showing us in these colors where the winds out of the west are stronger, and in these colors where the winds out of the west are weaker. This would be the momentum loss we'd have to worry about. And what I'm going to be having to watch is here and here. There's also a component of the subtropical jet there. And what you're seeing here is that we're carrying that Pacific momentum right along the U.S.-Canada border. And there's even some support a bit farther to the south. If this all started to turn over blue across the United States or the Canadian prairie, bright blue, then we would be having a discussion about big ridging events that would just shut it all down. And to make a case for that, let me take you back to an iconic year for when that happened. From mid-May to mid-June in 2012, the momentum began to back off right ahead of the solstice, right here. So you see this year it continues. By 6:15 in 2012, we lost it. Excuse me, kind of like my voice. So what is the point behind this? Look what happened by the time we went from the solstice all the way to mid-August. Blues are where we don't have momentum. The jet stream didn't just retreat north. It went way up here. This is like 60 degrees north latitude at points. And it left us with very weak flow. So when you see blue, that represents more north-south than west to east. And that means the pattern is stagnant and you don't get systems rolling through. So what do we do with this? Well, what ends up happening is the atmosphere builds up into what we call the triple ridge pattern. And in 2012, the flavor of that triple ridge was that the Pacific high moved here. The Bermuda high shifted a bit farther north up toward Greenland and left kind of in the wake of that, the splitting of these two high pressure cells was a large area of high pressure that sat here. And that, it doesn't look like it did much, right? This doesn't look like that impressive of a map. This shut off the Gulf of Mexico, though, and this drove a large section of the country deep into drought, while the jet stream kind of dipped into the west, and it dipped over the east as well. So when we look at all of that, the idea is there anything right now in the pattern that suggests it's going to happen? So I made this morning, and I apologize. The map projection is not the same as the previous, nor are the colors, but this is the color scheme that I typically use. We're looking at a 15-day forecast from the artificial intelligence forecasting model, trough and ridge pattern. Now, I've made the case that the jet stream is north, so there it is. It's going to sit right at the base of that of the blue. We are seeing more ridging here. There's an episode of ridging there. There's one that's into this area and here as well. And this is what's temporarily driving the heat that's coming through. But if you say, well, does this look like 2012 did at this point? And I would just say, well, no. If you have a look, there was big ridging in Greenland. Ridging way over here by the tail end of the Aleutian Islands, almost toward Japan. And as I look at it, I don't have that. Certainly don't have what's going on over Greenland. And so I think that this pattern we're currently in is carrying a bit more momentum. And I want to show you one other thing. There's always a lot of talk about La Nina and what La Nina can do during summer. We have to be careful about that because most times in summer, La Nina is kind of the second act. It's the thing that shows up late in the summer as an influence, not early. And so just as a reminder too, you don't have to have La Nina to get drought. The strongest signals for drought typically come from the North Pacific. This is one of the strongest negative PDO signals we've ever had. There was also a negative PMM signal. There was actually, in 2012, weak El Nino conditions trying to return. We were positive that particular summer. So I say all of that, and I know this is an extreme year, but that's what we tend to do. We tend to compare to the extremes. And it's also a reminder that you can get drought many different ways. You don't have to always go to the extremes. But if we're on the lookout for something that's going to just completely rob the atmosphere of all of its flow, you've got to have this. And do we have that right now? Well, there's a lot of different ways we can look at ocean temperatures. You can look at them compared to historical averages, or you can look at them compared to the global average at any given time. And the reality is, I'll just look at the global average compared to, I'll look at the anomalies compared to the current global average. We have La Nina trying to show up here. Again, not the most dominant factor. We do have the cooler water here and cooler water there. But this has been the thing that has been most intriguing. This warm water, which extends from Japan, continues to nudge its way toward the west coast. So I'm going to tell you what has to happen, I think, in order for us to get into a serious drought conversation for the main ag belts in the central U.S. to the east. And that would be for this water right here to go cold. Now you say, well, why would that go cold? It's a chicken and the egg kind of thing, right? In order to make this go cooler, we'd have to start driving the jet stream down into this area. Churn up that water, bring in cloud cover, bring in cooler water from the north. And it's not doing that. The jet's just living up here, and it's wiggling as it goes across, but it's running on the northern edge of this. It would also help if the Atlantic would cool off, but we don't expect that to happen either. So what I'm trying to say is the case I want to build is I have yet to find a complete loss of momentum in the kind of North American jet stream pattern that says to warn all of you, major drought episode is coming. But I'm also telling you that it's certainly not in the configuration that it was in years like 2014 or 2009 or years like that where the central U.S. was cool and stormy and wet. It is going to be hot and stormy, and there will be flash drought in this pattern. So all of that is to kind of set us up for where we're going in the near term and this new long-range data that just came out from the IRI. So let's get back to it. I'm going to use the AIFS. I've really enjoyed using it, so we'll just kind of keep an eye on it. I'm letting you know, though, I am watching the GFS and the Euro, and I'm looking for differences, just so you all are aware. There's our tropical system. There's the huge ridge that's building into the east by Wednesday, getting through Thursday and Friday. We take note that by Saturday, that ridge, while quite large, starts to slide back into the southern plains. I'll show you what the temperatures are going to do. But this is what keeps happening. So around that ridge, we just continue to keep flow. And by the time we get out there to Monday, the 24th, there's just flow. I mean, it's not stopped. There's no large omega block, no split flow in the west, it's just hot. And the ridge has moved. It was there, and now it's slid down through here. And then as we go forward, next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, just taking a look at the models, what happens? Much more amplified. The ridge builds up in the west. This, again, is at the end of the month. So we've knocked out that massive episode of heat here, but it's open and moving. So guess what? By the time you get to the 28th, 29th, 30th, we build it in again. So there's higher heights building in. So this seems to be kind of this, I don't know, you've heard me use the phrase before, but week on, week off, like the pattern is oscillating back and forth between developing larger ridges and then breaking it down with troughs that come in. Now, as we look out there to July, there's a ridge here, there's a ridge there, and there's a ridge here. But I still don't see the lack of momentum. I think it's going to be hot, but I think the atmosphere is going to have access to Gulf moisture. And that means if you're east of the Rockies, we keep it on. Now, what if you're in the Northwest? Troughs keep coming in. If you're in California, the heat's going to be on. It's going to stay on. The Great Basin, that'll be key to watch and trying to figure out if we develop more drought risk in that area going forward, because there is a scenario where we see that happening. I think we're going to see that in the IRI model at the end of this. Okay, so now we get back to the big ideas here. Early this morning, we have the excessive heat, or the heat advisories that stretch across a large area here around the eastern Great Lakes into the northeast, back to the eastern and central Corn Belt. We've got flood watches in Texas, all the way up here in the Red River Valley of the North. We also have a severe thunderstorm watch that's out. And take a look at this. There is a flood watch out for a very, very dry part of Kansas. In the west, we still have the winter storm warnings, the freeze watches and advisories, red flag warnings that stretch the parts of California, and excessive heat watch down in Arizona. So today's severe storm outlook, it's going to stretch along a front that'll strip right through this part of the country from western Ontario, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas. They've not really changed this. So it'll be the tail end of this front lingering in this area that's going to give us the greatest risk of heavy rains into Kansas. These are rains I wish we could have had 2 months ago, but there is rain coming into that area. By the time we get into the 19th, we don't see any major areas of severe storm risk. This will be the day on the 20th, and now you can see the ridge sliding through, so the ridge-riding storms come around its periphery here. This morning, I was just watching some of the radar data. This was up to about 6:40 this morning as we were recording, and we can see the storms that were rolling, across the northern plains into the upper Midwest early this morning, and then the light rain that was throughout the Mississippi Valley. Was the model well initialized? Well, about 7 a.m., this is what the NAM was showing, and I have to be honest, I think it did a decent job with this. There's the rain in Montana out ahead of it, and then by this evening, this is where we're going to be watching for those strong to severe storms in this area. So keep an eye out, slight risk, possibly more wind damage than anything out of this, but I would not be surprised with some embedded hail. Isolated storms continue inside of the heat. We saw this yesterday. We're going to see it again today. And then as we get into tonight, a lot of attention is going to come to the tail end of this front lingering in Kansas while the tropical pulse of moisture, look at that. That's in the overnight through tomorrow morning. But we're going to see the moisture coming in on the northern side of this system, which could be named Alberto at this point. As you get out there farther, I'm just rocking back and forth on Wednesday into Thursday. Can you see the ridge riding style of storms we've got here? And that's what we see going all the way out through midday Thursday. So we're going to keep an eye on this upper Midwest region, which has multiple days of potentially very heavy rainfall. So over the next 7 days, according to the European Artificial Intelligence, very wet through this corridor, back into this section of Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, where the front lingers, and there's the pulse of tropical moisture. We are much drier in the southeast, getting up here toward North Carolina, Virginia. This is an area that we've watched go over dry, and we've got to watch to see how long that's going to last. But I really like the NBM solution on this, because what it shows is that despite that heat, we are expecting convection in here, and we're going to watch storms pop. Now, the heavier rains north, this was well projected and well understood. Same thing with the tropical moisture to the south. But can you see the presence of the ridge and how the flow goes around it? WPC captures the same thing. This is the newest update from the European model. Again, maybe it is struggling to see where those pop-up storms are going to be in this area, but it certainly has the other main components of this down. And honestly, so does the GFS, but it's by far the wetter model in this area. Take a look. You can see, remember, these colors represent where the GFS is wetter. We see that going on through here and also parts of the Great Lakes states. Europeans wetter farther into Canada. And the models are still split down here as to where the heaviest rains are going to come from these tropical pulses like Alberto and then the moisture that's going to come after that. To go see all of that, let's go look at the model comparison, GFS left, European right. As we play this forward, there's the lingering front we talked about. There's the pulse of moisture coming in from the northern side of Alberto. Well, what could be named Alberto, sorry. This is into Thursday and Friday. The ridge is now working its way here. All around the edge, storms. Can you see this? This is a really fascinating forecast. We then get into Saturday and Sunday. A low curls up out of the Great Lakes and possibly heads towards Ontario and Quebec. And then as we work our way into next week, Monday, Tuesday, see where the storm track is? It's here. And we see lows rolling through like Winnipeg coming over into Ontario. And they will drag fronts, and there'll be moisture that'll interact with that could produce storms inside of some drier areas. But then some of the models are attempting to bring yet another pulse of tropical moisture out of the Gulf, like the GFSs. And the European, it's got it in there as well. It's just a little bit later. So I think we have a lot to be paying attention to here. Over the next 7 days, this is your best chance at getting an inch. If I add up the 4 days after that and take you out to 10 days, that's your probability of getting an inch of total accumulated precip. My greatest concern in this pattern is going to be here in the Carolinas and Virginia with being very, very dry. That's been an area that lately has gone over much drier. This is expected. This is some area that might start to show up on the drought monitor. Okay, week 2. Take a look. The models just continue to keep something alive and moving. So as long as the jet streams got flow, we don't see massive areas here of just big bullseyes of dry weather. So if there is going to be a major momentum loss in the pattern, it's not showing up yet. That's my main story here. Temperature-wise, still very cool in the Pacific Northwest. This is everywhere. I'm expecting a frost in the next 7 days. As we play forward, this is Tuesday's highs. Take a look at the contrast we've got here. 50s and 60s for highs on the back side of this. Mid to upper 90s on the east side of this. As we go forward into Wednesday, much cooler air. Remember, this is where the front lingers and the rain is going to be forming. Much cooler air here, still very hot up the east. We then go into Thursday, Friday. A lot of this is rain-cooled air. Getting into Saturday, that's where the ridge is really going to start to open up into this area. Heat comes back into the west on Sunday. Saturday and Sunday for the whole of the U.S. are going to be hot when you average it all together. And there's next Monday. I've already shown you the European model solution. So here's the day 5 through 10 GFS and day 10 through 15. It did warm up a bit here, but still not quite as warm as what the European model was suggesting it's going to stay. So last couple things. I've been watching the performance of the European extended forecast. This is the one that goes out 46 days. And I've not liked its precipitation forecast. I went back and verified it. It's missed. But what I'm watching it for is the pressure pattern. So if I play this out there into early July, I see lower pressure around Greenland. I see higher pressure around the Aleutian Islands. This is where the Pacific high is. If we saw this Pacific high building way over here and much higher heights building into there, in other words, you'd see these warm colors here, then I'd say be on the lookout in this area. But right now we don't see it. There is definitely heat in this pattern as we get into the month of July. So let's go look at the temperatures. Let's just do a 30-day outlook on temperatures. I completely buy into this all the way through July, just hot. But I still think it's going to stay stormy. For much of the U.S., this area, I think it's going to stay overall a stormier pattern. Okay, beyond that, new data just came out from the Columbia University's IRI multi-model probability forecast system, and this is the July through August and September outlook. A couple of things to take note of. Very dry season in South America. Very wet across Africa's Sahel. This is what's going to kick off this tropical season. We then see very wet throughout Indonesia. The Indian monsoon appears to be strong. The North China Plain, the Manchurian Plain look to be wet as well. There's a lot of ag in this area. Take a look at Ukraine getting into the southern Russian wheat belt. Models continue to show drier. And then the United States, if we just kind of take a quick look here, we'll just click on this and go North America. This is what it's forecasting the precipitation probabilities to look like. And I think the models are struggling understanding where this is going to go. But we're going to look at them anyway. So I'm just going to leave you there for a second, and that's what the newest forecast is looking like. Globally, I mentioned what was going on in Russia. Still very hot in that area. Very hot down in parts of South America. And if you look at the precipitation pattern, the model continued to back off in and around the Black Sea going forward. What's interesting about this is there were some storms that got into this area, but it was followed by heat and dryness. And I wonder how conditions are right now in this large productive area of Western Russia. The Mayu front continues to straddle the Yangtze River, flooding here, drier in the Manchurian Plain, North China Plain, well, really the North China Plain. We then take a look at some rain trying to move its way into western parts of Australia, or Western Australia, and that is an area that's really struggled with drought for the last several months. Their drought monitor down there continues to show, and just remember, our main ag areas are here, and then in this area. So those are broad brush strokes, but notice that we have significant parts of Australia that are in drought right now. But they're moving toward winter. Their winter solstice is showing up soon, so we just need to assess what's going to happen with their winter crops. So I'm going to stop there. That was a lot today, but a lot on my mind. So I'll keep you updated again tomorrow. Have a good week, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.